computer.
This meeting is being recorded.
Ooh,
Okay,
got it.
feedback right away.
Now it's official.
Oh, come on.
Oh,
So this is our resumption of the Fox Valley Astronomical Society Imaging Group that was suspended a couple of years ago because of COVID. And Andy was basically the host for that. And we would meet at Batavia Library every couple of months. And we would have a turnout of, 6 to 10 to 12 people and have 2 or 3 subjects and presentations and then like open discussions. And of course, the advantage of having it there at the library was we were able to bring our stuff with us and have some hands-on demos or questions or things like that. So maybe, in a couple, 3 months, if everything settles out, maybe we could try to do something like that again, pick a location or, at someone's house or something like that. We'll figure it out. So if you like, I'll start out with that first thing about what kind of equipment that we use and things like that. So for my main deep sky imaging, I use an SBIG STX. And I'm sorry, an 8XE. Yeah, 8XE. It has a self-guiding chip and thermoelectric cooling. So I always run it at -10°C, regardless of what the weather is outside. And I have an STI SBIG planetary camera I use for a guide camera. And the main telescope I use is either the Ritchie Crichton 6-inch with a focal reducer on it, either to f6, something like that. And then the other one is an, what's the other Astro? You have the telescope, Walter, Astro.
Astrotech.
Astrotech, yeah. A 60mm refractor that I use for imaging along with that SBIG. I use the filter wheel with that. And then also I have the Astrotech 80mm for a guide scope. If I use the Ritchie Crichton. And then once in a while, I'll slap a telephoto lens onto the camera for some wide field stuff. And then for image acquisition, I use the SBIG program called CCD Ops. And for the image processing, my primary is still that AIP for Windows. I have that on an older laptop, so I haven't had to deal with all of the Windows upgrades that are short-circuiting the AIP for Windows at this point. And then if I go any further with it, I'll use Photoshop to touch things up or to do the merging on wide field, things like that. And then I have 2 or 3 planetary cameras that I mess around with as well. So that's my imaging stuff. Who wants to go next?
I'll go.
Okay.
Okay, I've got my Skywatcher EQ6R Pro mount. I got that because of I also have a 6-inch Ritchie Crichton telescope, and I needed something a little more accurate than what I had. And that seemed to be a good fit for that. But I have 2 main imaging telescopes. I have my 6-inch RC scope, and I have a Williams Optics Z81 refractor that has a focal reducer and flattener that I attach in there that a filter goes into. And I use a old Canon DSLR with that. And the main programs I'm using for image acquisition is astrophotography tool. PhD 2, and I'm processing mainly in Serial, and I'm trying to learn PixInsight. I bought that. I wanted to get away from Photoshop, so I'm trying to work on learning a little more about PixInsight because I think it should be better than Photoshop does, is everything I've read. But that's pretty much what my setup is right now.
Okay.
Well, I saw Walter go next.
Yeah, I'll go. So I only have one main imaging camera right now. It's my ASI 294. It's a monochrome camera, and it's also cooled like Mark's. So I take images in either narrowband or LRGB. As far as scopes, I don't have a main one. You know, I have 3 lenses that I pick from depending on the target, but lately I've been using my Astro 130, which is my longest focal length at the moment. I've used that with a focal reducer, and just recently this Friday my field flattener came in, so eager to test that. But before that, you know, during the winter, I used my short focal length 92 millimeter to image nebulas and wider field, and for like ultra wide fields, I use my camera lens at 135 millimeter and Milky Way shots. I believe it's a 14 millimeter, and on occasion I use my Canon unmodified camera. That's just a family camera, but it works great for those Milky Way shots. As far as mount, I only have one mount. My Ioptron 45, Gem 45. And I use Nina for my capturing. And I go between Photoshop and PixInsight. I find PixInsight is great for processing and stars and whatnot, but Final Touch is Photoshop is still, in my opinion, the easiest and the best to make adjustments to the small details. So Nina with PhD2. In the fall last year for planetary, I used a color ASI camera. It's a 224 MC, and that one, when I'm not using it for planetary, that's what I use for guiding. And what else did I miss? I think that's it. Yeah.
Okay.
That's my setup right there.
All right, I can go next. I have two rigs. The small one is an Ioptron GEM 28 mount, which I absolutely love. It just, I've had absolutely no issues with it whatsoever from day one. And on that, I have a William Optics 61 refractor, which is that 360 millimeter focal length. On it, I have a ZWO 183 one-shot color camera. I cool all my cameras to -15 no matter what, because I chose that because that's probably as far as I can go inside the house, cooling and still get dark frames. So that's why I settled on -15. So what else is on there? Oh yeah, so acquisition, I have the ASI Air Plus. And when I'm home, I control everything through Ethernet. I have my son-in-law install Ethernet ports to the outside of the house, and I run cables out right out to the rigs. What else is there to say about that? And I have some filter drawers that I could just slip filters in and out in for that. So yeah, I have a, it's guided by what's 130 millimeter focal length guide scope with a ZWO 120 what is it called? The MCS or something? I don't know, something like that. The bigger rig, which you've all seen the mount anyway, but you haven't seen everything else, is a Las Mandy GM 811. It has a, it can handle 55 pounds for imaging. So I've discarded anything that has to do with collimation. So I just couldn't take it anymore. So I had it, you know, that nice Newtonian, and it served me so well. But it was just frustrating me that I have to collimate it every time, and sometimes the collimation wouldn't hold. And anyway, and I actually gave that away to Jim Reynolds. So I hope he makes good use of it. So what's riding on top now is a Explore Scientific 127 triplet refractor. It has a 952 millimeter focal length, so able to do galaxies pretty well with that. And I'm using similar to Walter. I'm running a mini PC to it, and running Nina. I used to run Sequence Generator Pro, but it's pretty clear to me that they're not going to be able to keep up at all, and I don't even think they're going to try with Nina, which is free, by the way. What else do we want to say about that? Yeah, so that on that I have a 294mm monochrome camera. I have, you know, same as Walter, LRGB, and the 3 narrow bands filters on it with a filter wheel. I don't know. That's probably about it.
It's quite a list, Andy.
Oh, I guess I'll go. I've got, I'm not, don't have as much stuff hanging around. I have a CGEM Ioptron 25, which I love, and I'm now working on. I'm going to try and get an ASI Pro on all that good stuff and get it out, make it more effective. TAC 60 rides on it, or a Sky 90, TAC Sky 90, or the 60 DA. With a little 60 Astro.
Yeah, we see stars. We don't see your behind.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That's right. Okay. Okay. Yeah, the stars were taken by the TAC 60.
Okay.
So that's in Lily Lake. But other than that, camera, I'm still using a Canon 60DA, or a Canon R.
Yeah.
Basically. Neither of which are fixed, although I did buy my wife an infrared camera, which is, you know, an old Canon 6D. I'm thinking of borrowing it, using it to, he's given me permission, I can borrow it. Processing, I use Astro Pixel and Photoshop, and I'm not really good with Astro Pixel, but it's pretty good for the range of stuff that I do, because my other telescopes are in the iTelescope network. So with the kind of telescopes that they've got in that network, Astro Pixel is a good choice. And I use Photoshop and Topaz suite to work on some of the processing. Other than that, I've got a TAC FS 128 F8 sitting on an MI2 F250 mount, And that's in the observatory, but I don't use it that much because it's pretty shoddy out here weather-wise, so I don't get an opportunity to crank it out. The observatory is having some structural problems, so I'm getting those fixed. And finally, the fun part is I've been using the Equinox. So just sit there, turn the thing on, sit with my little tablet and start imaging. And it's up and running in like 4.5 minutes and finding what I want it to find. Now, and this is the first generation or second generation because it's the Equinox EV. So I found that to be really interesting tool for astrophotography. And I've used it most nights when it's been clear, which is about 2. So 2 or 3.
Yeah, right.
And also for observing. I like to observe, and I just get fascinated that I can see things with my eyes that would take 15, 20 minutes behind a telescope to even get a grip on. So it's an interesting tool. That's it. The eye telescope keeps me really busy because I've got telescopes in Chile, Siding Springs, New Mexico, and Spain. And I've learned there that the skies can be cloudy around the entire world.
Hey, Mark, I forgot to mention, for as far as processing, I'm now 100% in Fix Insight. So maybe one of the sessions down the road, you can kind of go over some of the high level stuff that I do in there.
Mhm.
Are you using that for stacking as well?
Yeah,
Andy?
everything. I don't use anything else. Yep.
Yeah, that'd be a good one because I hear a lot of people saying, I think Fix Insight is the greatest thing, but I can't get it to work.
Well, its learning curve is amazingly steep. So yeah, I probably spent 100 hours on tutorials just to get decent at it.
Wow.
Yeah.
I've been doing the same thing with Astro Pixel because it's easy to use to start, but to use it well,
Yeah. Right.
it'll break your brain.
Right. So Bob or Ashley?
Well, Ashley, you want to go first? You don't want to be the
Sure.
last.
Yeah, I have a very simple setup. It's just a crop sensor Nikon DSLR on a tripod. And I'm working with Photoshop. Yeah.
And you mentioned Photoshop for your processing?
Yeah.
Okay. What kind of lenses on the
The one I've
camera?
been using recently is just for some Milky Way stuff. I think I have like a 35mm.
Do you do any tracking?
No, but I want to. That's next.
One step at a time.
Yeah, that's right.
You can borrow my Omicron if you want.
Oh, that would be awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd love that.
Okay,
And
I got a note there.
Mr. Butwell.
My turn?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I juggle my telescopes. I think a better word would be modular. Right? I have a C8, a C6, a C5. I've got a couple of refractors. I bought a 80mm f5 for guiding, which I'm going to turn into a primary.
Yeah.
My camera, I've always been using the the Canon. It's a APS-C chip inside. I just realized a week or two ago that it's it's 11 years old. So it's a classic now. I've kind of peaked on all the quality of imaging that I can do. I have not been able to improve in any direction in either tracking or exposures or focuses. I got that down. Post-processing. I played around with the Revolution Imager for a while. It's got a teeny tiny little chip, but it really shouldn't affect anything because that teeny tiny little chip is like a teeny tiny little square out of a full frame. It's just harder to get your subject onto that little bit and without slop. I do like Ashley lately. I just slap a lens on the front of my Canon. It came with a kit lens, which is a 19 to 200 zoom. Not the greatest, but then the pictures I take are just as hampered by the noise in the camera with my technique. The skies around here, unless I go out to Lee, I'm not going to get anything spectacular. I would have to do as Herman does. I'd have to rent some time on a real telescope. So I've kind of spent the last season rethinking and going back to the drawing board with. I have learned a lot about lenses and cameras, post-processing, specialized post-processing, starting with Topaz and then reading up on Fix Insight and some of these others that are, they're all free and what was I saying? So yeah, that's it. Right now, I've got my two mounts. I've got a AVX, which I modified. I had super bearings put in it, and I also have, incidentally, after I added up the cost of putting in a couple of bearings, I might as well have sold it and bought a Osmandi. But I did it, and I learned about that too. So it's really, I'm doing it not to produce the pictures, but to gain the knowledge. And one of the key things I've learned is just how much post-processing is done by Hubble and what's going to be done by the Webb telescope, by ESA and all those guys. And it's all in the post-processing. You've got to have a good camera, of course, to get rid of the noise. But, everything that I've got is kind of pretty matched to my capabilities. I'm never going to produce anything as good as what Herman can do on a real telescope, or what Andy's been doing with his rig. I've been chasing the ASI aired box, and now they're starting to come out with Raspberry Pi kits.
Yeah.
That comes with software and everything else. You buy that and you get basically a Raspberry Pi. A ASI Air functionality that you can guide everything with. So at this point in time, the last purchase I made was a SV Bony color camera that doubles as a deep sky or guide camera. And I'm working on integrating all of that into my modular setup, because I can hang any one of my lenses on any one of my mounts, which in addition to the AVX, I have the Alt Azimuth Celestron on a C6, and I have on the C5, I got an Alt Azimuth pre-2000, pre-2K bug but it doesn't find planets, but it can still find the stars because they haven't moved them around so much. I've really learned a lot about the fine thing that you can do with the post-processing, stretching, how to stretch, how to selectively stretch, gradients, darks, flats, you know, all of those things you need to do. So I think I've got a full kit of skills. I know how Picasso does it. I just can't. I'm just not a Picasso yet, you know? And I don't think that's going to happen. So I intend to have fun. And right now I'm looking at how I can push the envelope, kind of like what Herman was saying. You know, I can't go out here in my neighborhood and take wonderful pictures. So perhaps what I need is something where I can go out for 5 minutes and get a picture and take pictures of other stuff that I would never be able to image unless I had a rig like Andy's. So right now I'm at a crossroads. I don't know which direction I'm going to go. I could go back to the Revolution imager. I could go to the C6 and I don't think I'm going to spend $1,000 on a dedicated cooled image sensor. But right now, I'm here to get some perspective.
As we all are.
Yep. I'm in the same boat when it comes to a camera. I keep thinking about going that next step away from a DSLR, but I don't know. That's a lot of money. And do you get mono or do you get color or the sensor size?
Yeah, and not only that, but how big are the pixels? That's a thing too.
I think that's a great subject for maybe the next meeting.
You know, you have to match the pixels to the objective.
Yeah, very much so.
You know, you don't just say, "Oh yeah,
Absolutely.
full frame is the way to go." You know, how big are the pixels on that full frame?
And does it match the focal length of your scope?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know.
Yep.
I do have to say I forgot one, which I don't. I have sitting in front of me in my little office here is my little Explorer Scientific PMC8,
Ah,
and which I hardly have an opportunity to use, and that'll also carry the TAC 60, but haven't had a chance to use it for a long time. But it's basically sort of got all of your remote control because it works off a tablet or your phone.
right.
And it's all free software and open software, and it's being improved by the other users. So I can't wait to get it out there. Just got this.
What was the name of that thing again?
It's Explorer Scientific. It's a PMC8. I think they also have a 100, and they have a bigger one which will carry a 7-inch refractor. But they're all basically handled by an app. And the app is very similar to ASI Pro, except it doesn't guide, as far as I know. And it's one of the least expensive mounts you could possibly buy on the planet.
Okay.
Well, that was interesting to hear about all the different approaches. And
Oh, and I forgot, I have a TikTok too.
You have a what?
An Omegon
Oh, yeah.
on a wedge.
Which is pretty
And
cool.
yeah, there you go. Wedge and an Omegon. That is what I've used the most lately because you know why? It's in my pocket.
yeah,
I've got a ditty bag, and the ditty bag has got all my mosquito repellent, my hand warmers, and an Omegon TikTok.
Can't beat that.
And a camera. Yeah, that's it. That's all you need.
Yeah.
so Ashley, were you going to be at the outings this weekend at the Wasco Farm?
No, I'm
Okay.
downtown this weekend, so.
Okay. I don't know I don't know if I'll be at the next club meeting or Star Party, but I'll get that to you sometime here soon.
Okay,
And the instructions.
awesome.
Now, I was saying that it's interesting, the different approaches and the different timeline that we all got into the imaging and what camera you chose, what equipment you chose, or what was available at the time. And so, I think that would be another, like Andy said, when we had a couple of the meetings, okay, how did you pick and why did you choose a certain camera and the accessories and things like that? And, for example, the only reason I got into it again was go-to and narrowband imaging. Otherwise, I don't think I'd be imaging because I can't do anything around my house other, that's reasonable without that. So, but I want to get into the DSLR wide field stuff for the Milky Way. That's my next project one of these days. Okay. So Andy, do you want to do your presentation? We're just only about half hour into the meeting. And then after your presentation, then we'll just open it up for general questions for as long as we want to do it,
Sure.
Notes.
All right, you got to give me sharing rights.
Will do. Okay, you should be able to.
Very good. So screen 2. All right, so I didn't know really what to call this presentation. So I kind of went with this self-contained imaging computers. We've already discussed a little bit about it tonight, with the Raspberry Pi, and I think it's running K-Stars. Is that right, Bob? Yeah. Well, anyway, that's
Yeah.
And I don't know too much.
K-Stars. That's it. Yeah.
Okay. All right. But here, the thing that is really interesting and I think kind of important about the self-contained imaging computers is that in this hobby, there's just so much to learn in order to do the imaging, right? You got to have accurate polar alignment. You don't have to have go-to, but you could. It sure helps. It makes things easier. Plate solving, which is something that was new to me even a year and a half ago. I didn't understand what that was, but that is an amazing feature and makes life so much easier once you figure it out. Guiding has to be decent depending on your focal length. Like if you're going with a shorter focal length, like some of us have been discussing those like 60 millimeter and maybe the 80 millimeter scopes, you can get away with it more, but when you get up into the longer focal lengths, the guiding becomes more and more important. Otherwise you have elongated stars. And then focusing is another big thing. And if you want to get good focusing, you really have to use something like a Bahtinov Max or electronic assisted focusing devices. And then calibration frames is a whole nother story, and we'll probably bring that up again in a future meeting as well. And so with all those things, that there's such a great learning curve when it comes to using a laptop, whether it's Windows or iOS or Linux. I'm jumping ahead of myself. It's not self-contained. It means there's a whole bunch of software you need to download and whatnot. So anyway, but I'm jumping ahead. So like I was, here it is. So software, there's a high learning curve on the software. So you know, like I started out with Sequence Generator Pro, and the user interface just is not very good. But it has the capabilities to do nearly everything, right? And so when you can do everything, that means the complexity is high. And that's part of the reason. And I got so used to it that when Nina came out and everybody was, if you haven't heard of Nina, it's, and Walter, you might have to help me. It's nighttime, what's the acronym?
Night imaging and
Night astronomy or something.
yeah, night imaging and astronomy.
Yeah, okay. Which is really great. It's open source, has a nice user interface, but I just had a hard time jumping to it because I was so ingrained in this other user interface that was so hard to jump to something new. Anyway, that's kind of a side point. But when it comes to laptops, you know, not just software, but the operating system becomes a key component.
That's not a side point. That is one of the major sticking points why people stick to one software and don't want to go to anything else.
Very much so.
You know, I've had enough.
Yeah.
You know, it's bad enough when they move an icon.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. So, you know, one gotcha, which I'm sure, you know, anybody who's been imaging with a laptop for a long time probably has seen, if you've been imaging on the second Monday of the month, Microsoft installs all their security updates and reboots your computer for you, which if you're running things at night, you've lost a whole imaging session, right? So, you know, it's just little things like that. And then you know, there are several different types of software packages you have to learn. And, you know, Nina, PhD2, they're not very simple, even though PhD2 means push here dummy. There's still a lot of things you can get wrong in setting it up correctly, so that you can just push here, you know, that button and it starts guiding. You know, and I'm sure, you know, Mark could elaborate too on what is it you use again, Mark?
For which one?
For acquisition.
The CCD ops,
Yeah.
which is SBIG software.
Right. Yeah. So, and you know, that's processing. But yeah, so, you know, and so you have all these different choices, and you're like, okay, what's the best for me? And it's not an easy decision without a ton of research.
You know, Andy, just as a side on that, remember our guest speaker Monday night, you weren't there, but Bob was talking about how he tried to modify this thing, this telescope and stuff, which is, I mean, that's what he does, just for everybody's FYI. He loves to do that kind of stuff. But he said, you know, he ends up with two computers, one guiding and one acquisition. And actually, that's what I do too. I've got an old Dell and an old Toshiba, neither of which are hooked up to the internet. So I don't have to worry about upgrades. So they still work everything.
Yeah.
And so, you know, that's another choice you can make. You can, you know, disconnect yourself from the internet on your astrophotography, astro imaging computer.
You know, by the way, just as an aside, you can always go to the system settings and make sure you're up to date. Then it will not come up.
Yeah, right.
No,
But,
I do that like regularly, you know.
yeah. There's also the option of saying, hey, my operating hours are 5
absolutely.
p.m. to 5 a.m. And that's how I avoid it. And I say, do not reboot this computer on your own. You
Right.
know?
Bad computer.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, and Walter, please jump in as I get into things with the ASIR once I start talking about it, because Walter's used it and is familiar. So, you know, as we had mentioned earlier, you know, a lot of these self-contained little computers are based on Raspberry Pi, and that's an operating system based on Linux. And, it's pretty neat because, like Bob had mentioned, you have free variations, and they have all this open source software that would allow you to do all these, all this stuff in one little tiny self-contained little unit, kind of, just this big. And, it's really a nice option. Now, I can't speak to anything else but the ASI Air because that's all I've used. But I have watched some YouTube videos on, at least this one guy who's been fighting through using the just the open Raspberry Pi and getting K-stars to work properly. And there's a series of like 5 videos where he's like, well, I ran into this problem, don't know what to do. And then the next video he says, oh, this is how I solved it. So, if you're kind of like a tinkering kind of person, that might be a great option for you. But the other option, which I think is a really good option with one caveat, which I'll talk about later, is this ASI Air. Now, this is the Pro version. It doesn't have the antenna on it. That's the ASI Air Plus. And again, it's self-contained, and the software in it is written by ZWO, and it's pretty darn good, and it's pretty well maintained. Laszlo, I can't see the computer. All right. So advantages with the ASI Air. Question?
So, real quick, one of the alternatives to K-Stars or the ASI Air Pro is a very popular one also, Astro.
Yes.
And I believe that's like a all-in-one program you can purchase for, I think, like $50.
Yeah.
And you would install that in a SD card and then pop it into a Raspberry Pi unit. And it would function very similar to an ASI Air with the added benefit that it supports, other non-ASI Air cameras and right. Rotators and focusers and all that other good stuff.
Right.
What's that one called again? What's that one called?
Astro.
Yes.
You can either just buy the program to put it on an SD card, or they actually sell a unit like an ASI Air Pro with the program, which is I think similarly priced about $300. But the program itself, it's been a long time since I looked into it, but I think it was somewhere around the range of $50 for a lifetime license.
Which is really a nice option. And so I might as well talk about that a little bit. So the advantage of the Astro is that it can support any manufacturer's equipment, as long as they're writing stuff to the ASCOM standard, which is the open source astronomy communications standard. So you could, if you had a QHY camera, dedicated astronomy camera, or a ZWO dedicated, or if you had a Sony DSLR, as long as somebody's writing those ASCOM drivers and interfaces, you can run it there. Where the ASI Air is developed by ZWO, but they only allow ZWO devices. So that's the gotcha. And, ZWO doesn't have a rotator, which to me isn't all that important. But, if you wanted to get the Andromeda Galaxy in, you have to rotate it. So then you have to figure out how to do it manually, because there's no automated way to do it with a rotator. Anyway, but compared to the laptop solution, it's very inexpensive. It's like, I don't even know, was it like $350, Walter? Something like that?
Well, I think the Plus, like the one you have, is around $350. The Pro are are well, the previous model, and then you can find them for anywhere from 250 and down.
Yeah.
If you order it new from the websites, I believe it's $299.
Okay. So, you know, compared to a laptop, I think it's from a cost standpoint, it's a great alternative. There are no concerns over drivers or software because, you know, since you're locked into ZWO, they supply all that. You don't have to load anything ever. It's all there and it works because they have to make it work. But I think the biggest advantage of it is the learning curve is so much easier. I have to step back and say, you know, I understood all the concepts before I got it. So for me, it was extremely easy. But I do know of other people who have gotten it and they struggled for a couple times out. But after that, it's just natural. I don't know, Walter, you want to make any observations?
Yeah, no, definitely. Actually, I don't know if you remember, but when I first got started almost 2 years ago, my first device was an ASI Air, and I didn't know anything about anything, and I found it very intuitive, you know, because you want to take an image, you click there. You want to guide, you go to the guiding tab, or you want to focus, you click on the focusing button. So it's very intuitive, kind of like just using any other app. And other than, you know, setting your equipment in there and knowing which parameters you want to enter, I think that using the app itself was fairly easy to learn and pick up real quick.
What really surprised me too was how really well maintained the software is. They have firmware updates pretty regularly, and it's really, you know, updating firmware, if you've ever done it before, is usually it's a little like, what if something goes wrong? But it's very, very seamless as long as your device is on the internet. And they update features like very quickly. And I know Walter's on the beta users for it, and they get an advanced look. And I don't know why I haven't done it. I just haven't. But anyway, but they update it very, very frequently, and new features come out, you know, a lot. So it has very.
They just installed. Real quick, Andy, the most recent major update, they also added a planetarium to the app.
Yeah, right.
Which some people love, some people don't love, but you know, I think it's pretty neat to have a planetarium in there. You can, it knows your focal length and camera chip size, so you can frame your shot and select, go to that spot. You know, it's pretty neat. Yeah,
it is. It's pretty. I used it last time out for the first time. It was pretty nice. I was just playing with it, but it has very good Facebook support group. It's these guys, I think, are really interestingly smart. They got all these tech people involved as part of, I forget what they call them, but some sort of experts, but they end up being support that aren't employed by ZWO, and they just answer every kind of question you can imagine. So if you were to go directly to ZWO for some support of, you know, not necessarily hardware related, or you don't get that kind of support directly from them, as you know, and in response time anyway. So some of the other advantages is, you know, I have an electronic focuser on both of my rigs, and the focusing with ASI Air, I don't have to think about it, and I never did. It just does it. It focuses it well. It's just funny. When I was preparing this, I was thinking about it. It's like, yeah, I never think about this. It just focuses, and I move on. And those of you who focus manually know what a struggle it can be.
So how does it focus?
It runs through a routine based on the HFR. So the what's that stand for?
Half flux radius.
Thank you. Yeah, and it'll go through and it'll create this V curve. You have to get it somewhat in focus for it to start. Then it goes out a certain distance. It goes closer and closer and closer, and then it figures out what the bottom of that V curve is, and that it locks it in. And then you could tell it to, if your telescope is going to fluctuate with cooling or heating, you could say, all right, refocus every half hour, every hour.
So, but what does it physically do to the telescope focusing? How does it focus?
It'll actually move the focuser in and out. You take off one of the wheels of the focuser, hook it up to the electronic focuser, and it turns it.
Okay, so there's an electronic focuser interface.
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
It's an add-on, Mark. It's
okay.
Separate purchase.
That's what I wanted to find out. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. So it can handle the ZWO filter wheels. So like Walter and I have the 7-position filter wheels. You tell it when you first install it, and you first come, the software first comes up. You say, okay, I have these filters. They're in these slots in the filter wheels. And then you don't think about it again. You just say, when you're plugging in and saying, I want to take a picture with this filter, it'll just know and always use it correctly. It has a great polar alignment routine, and this has really evolved beautifully because many of you know, if having to do polar alignment manually with a polar scope, you have to have a view for the North Star, and it always had that option, but now it has the 3-point polar alignment, which is essentially the drift method, if you've heard of it. You don't have to have a view of the North Star anymore. You just point it in a direction and it'll go and tell you where to move your alt and NAS. And it works pretty well. And Walter's used that more than I have, so you could comment on that.
Yeah. I've used both, just the good old-fashioned polar alignment and the 3-point polar alignment, and they're both great, and for the longest, I think for over a year, I never polar aligned my scope at home because I was under the impression that you had to have a clear view of the North Pole, and it wasn't a year into it that I discovered that the ASA Air has a feature, or that the polar alignment will work as long as you have a view of anywhere within 30 degrees of the North Pole. And 30 degrees is huge, so I was a happy camper when I discovered that. And then shortly after that, a few months after that, they introduced the 3-point polar alignment, which you don't even have to have a clear view of the northern hemisphere. You can still polar align, which it's really come in handy in the summer when all my trees are full of leaves, or when I have to set up my scope next to the house so that I can frame my shot to the south, or any number of circumstances. So both of them work pretty well. And like Andy said, they're real easy. It's a matter of just eyeballing your mount north and then hitting the button on the ASA Air, and it does most of the work for you.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't do most of the work. It does most of the calculating.
It's
still
missing
have to
little
move the telescope.
Right.
Still have to move the telescope.
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah.
You're a slave to the AI.
Yes. And what's nice is too is, and I suppose this is probably true with any kind of software polar alignment. When you have a smaller setup like I do over here, you know, that's my GEM 28 and my William Optics refractor. If I'm way off on, you know, like if I'm 5 to 10 degrees off, I could just pick it up and replace it, you know, maybe a 1/4 inch in the leg, and that's like a couple degrees. So, you know, it gets it close enough where you can start using the knobs too. Another side point. If you're not familiar with plate solving, and it's an amazing feature. Basically what it's doing is, for instance, if you wanted to image the Andromeda Galaxy, you would tell, and this is true of any software that has plate solving, but you would tell the ASIR, go to M31, and it would slew over to it, and then it takes a picture. And then it says, well, I have this plate of M31 in my database. I'm going to compare the stars against that plate to see where I'm really pointing. And then it will say, I am, 30 minutes off in RA, or I don't know, is that right? Or is that DEC? Whatever. And move the scope over and take another picture and compare it again. And usually you don't need more than 2, and it gets it, and it's dead on. So the go-to capabilities with this plate solving is just, you don't have to think about anything as far as, getting your object in. You just say, this is what I want, go to, it goes, figures out the error, and you're dead nuts on to the object. So again, those capabilities are, you have that in Nina, you have that in, Sequence Generator Pro. John, what was the one you use?
What was that?
What's the acquisition software you're using?
I'm using Astro photography tool.
Right, and that has plate solving.
That has plate solving, and I've also used with PhD too. They do have a drift align in that as well.
Yes, yeah, that was too daunting for me.
I used it a few times when I didn't have a view, and it seemed to work.
Yeah. Okay, so it has a database of objects, and I didn't look up as to what it had, but it has NGC, Messier, of course. It has what else does it have, Walter? IC catalogs.
It's got NGC, Messier. I don't think it has IC.
Yeah, I think it does.
What about Caldwell?
I think it has Caldwell. I'm not sure. What it doesn't have, and this is kind of a funny story, is the LDN catalog, which is Lane's Dark Nebula. So when I went to the Star Party in Michigan and says, I want to go to the Dark Shark Nebula, and I punched in the LDN number, and it says, what? So I had to go around and get to somebody else's computer, because I didn't have one there, and say, what's the NGC number for the Dark Shark Nebula? And then I had to figure out how to frame it. So anyway, there are some gotchas there. I lost the whole night because I framed it wrong. Then I found out how to do it properly when Walter told me.
Just as a side note, Andy, too, it does have the option. You could enter the coordinates manually if you wanted to.
That's how I learned it.
Like if you didn't know the designation number for an object, you could look it up in Stellarium and just type in the coordinates.
Yeah.
Wikipedia has actually worked a few times with the astrophotography tool to enter something I wanted to see up or point to in the sky that wasn't listed in their catalog.
Yeah.
I went on Wikipedia and got those coordinates and threw it in there, and it worked beautifully.
That's a smart idea. I wish I had thought of it then. All right. So as far as guiding goes, it's got all the features of the latest PhD2 guiding. In fact, it's using the open source PhD2 software in it. So it has the multi-star guiding, and once it's so automatic. It'll calibrate the mount if you want it to. It's one of those things which is, again, is completely thoughtless to me. It just works. Now that I have to say that is dependent on the type of mount you have. If you're going to have trouble with, if your mount isn't great as far as tracking accuracy, no amount of software is going to fix that. If you got a great variation in the gears, or whatever, we could talk about that as a separate aside.
I guess it doesn't hurt to tune your mount and make sure how it tracks before you go in there now.
Right.
Get all the bells and whistles going.
Right.
So Andy, does the software pick what guide star out of the field, or are you able to do that?
The multi-star, it picks several on its own. You can physically say, I don't want to do multi-star, and pick your own. But with the multi-star guiding, it picks them, and
it'll pick up to 12.
Yeah. Okay, and then the field of view for the guide stars. So, the time of exposure of your guiding image, right? Because I take like 5-second exposure, and then that gives me, X amount of stars to pick from, and then I'll pick one that I think looks the best. That'll help guide, not too bright, not too dim. In the right section of the field of view, so anything drifting won't drift out of the field by accident,
right? By
overcorrecting. So that's my question about the guiding.
Yeah. So that's again, this is I think the advantage of the multi-star is that you don't have to think about it. And by having multiple stars, what it's doing is figuring out what that HFR is combined.
Okay.
And locking it down. Like when that feature first came out in PhD2, when I was using my computer, my guiding accuracy improved 20%, just because of doing the multi-star.
But you do have the option of selecting any star you want, Mark, as long as it's not saturated.
Yeah.
Right.
But I haven't thought about picking my own star since that feature came out.
I think I only had to do it once myself because it kept insisting on picking a hot pixel. And
well, if you have the dark library, though.
It's actually a feature they're working on in the beta program.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah,
that's what I would be afraid of. It would pick a hot pixel, or like you say, saturated star or something like that.
And to be fair too, against it did pick a globular cluster on me once too.
Yeah.
But then again, it had 5 other stars, so it ended up not mattering. But anyway, but again, if, from a beginner's point of view, I don't have to think about it, and whereas, like Mark, myself, Walter, and Herman, we've gone through all the iterations of, what the PhD2 and trying to learn that. And so anyway, it's just.
Well,
nice.
I guess here's another variable, of course, is the weather and the sky conditions and windy and things like that. And so, again, this is like you just said, Andy, we've been through a whole bunch of stuff. So experience would help you pick out a better or better, the best star for your equipment on any given night versus, you know what I'm saying? It's that you have, there's other variables that the computer doesn't know about that it can't measure. Okay, it's windy tonight, so I don't want to take certain star, need a certain star for the wind so it doesn't bounce out of the guide box too fast.
Yeah, but yeah, here again, the multi-star, it won't matter because if that star went out, it would just drop that one, but then have the other up to 11 stars still going.
It would ignore it.
Yeah. Yeah.
See, here's what happens. So I'll just give you an example of what happens on the S-Big stuff. So the guide camera gives you the field of view and there's, 20 stars in there. Then I pick one to be the guide star. And then that goes into a little box by itself. That's the only image you see when you guide. And then I have a couple of graphs for right ascension and declination, keep track of the plus or minus where it's going so I can see how it's tracking that night. And that's what I was saying about I don't want the star to be too big in that box. And I don't want it to be, a certain place on the field. So if it overcorrects, it bounces out. So I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah.
What I'm used to doing.
Yeah. But again, a new person going in wouldn't know any of that. And they don't need to know any of that.
Okay. Because
it for me, and Walter, you could say otherwise, but it has always worked. If your seeing is real bad, it really won't make any difference too much if you have multi-star or not. It may be a little bit better, but anyway.
And how does it calibrate the mount for guiding?
And that would be probably one of the things in your setup. It has some defaults as far as calibration steps goes, but you would have to know what is best for your scope. So you'd have to look at the documentation. But from the iOptron, I never changed the initial parameters, and it just worked again.
Okay, because what I have to do is tell it the declination of the area that I'm going to image it. So it knows, like, if I'm in Cygnus, I give it plus 29 degrees. If I'm at the Rhine Nebula, it's minus 20. Whatever it is, and then calibrate it for that declination as well.
Yeah. No, go ahead, Walter.
I think the ASIR takes into account the focal length and field of view of your guide scope in calculating the step size, because it aims to always accomplish the calibration in 12 steps east and 12 steps north, or whatever it is. Right. But for some, I've noticed for my 130 millimeter lens, it might set a step size of 2,500 milliseconds, whereas my Astrotech, it might set the step size at 400 milliseconds.
Right.
So,
right.
It's got some of the adjustments that you can adjust in PhD2, like aggressiveness, but it is a watered down version of PhD2. Yeah. It's like Andy said, it's mainly meant to like just push the button and let it make most of the decisions for you.
Yeah.
And then how many times per minute, or what's the interval for the guiding correction?
You can set it to be what you want.
Okay.
Yeah.
With the multi-star, it's recommended you go, it's counterintuitive that you go shorter intervals. So basically, when I'm using the computer, I usually do somewhere between 2.5 to 3.5.
3.5.
With a single star.
2.5 or 3.5 what?
seconds.
Okay.
When I'm using multi-star, I usually 1 second to 1.5.
Okay. See, I've run into a problem where I go too short of an interval and then you get chatter
Yeah,
because you're correcting like too soon.
yeah, and you're correcting for seeing, right? And that's
Yeah.
not good.
Yeah.
But the multi-star, it's compensating for the seeing somewhat.
Okay.
Yeah, and again, it depends on the scope you have too, right? The mount, I mean, how good your tuning is on your mount.
Right. So one more item to bring up: the relationship between polar alignment and guiding and correcting. And Herman was at this conference as well, but one of the fellows that gave a tip was, don't be perfectly polar aligned because you'll chatter all night.
Yeah.
Because you'll try to get to the center line from both directions.
Yeah.
And so one of the tips was, okay, get your polar alignment and then tweak it either east or west so that you're north-south, you're only pulling in one direction. Because the right ascension motor, you're either going to stop it or have it go faster. But declination, you've got to compensate for reversing the motor.
Right.
And so if you can get your mounts skewed a little bit off the pole so that you're correcting in one direction in declination. So you're always moving that motor in the same direction. So that's something to be aware of. And again, when you're doing the correction, you have a lot of chatter back and forth on either side of the zero line, right?
Or yeah, the other option too is you can go a little bit counterweight heavy, or not counterweight heavy, but what am I thinking
East
of?
heavy.
East heavy. Or west heavy, depending on what.
Right, but that's for right ascension. But I'm talking about declination.
Oh, declination, right.
Where you would chatter back and forth, and the backlash of the motor, you always have to have that on either side. Where if you're always correcting in one direction, you have nothing to take up. It always bumps it in the same direction.
I should think that on declination, the same thing. You'd make it north heavy or south heavy.
No, because in right ascension, you're always going in the motor is always going in the same direction. And you either stop it or you go faster. There's no backlash in there when you're guiding. But north-south goes back and forth. Forward and reverse on the motor.
Well, the good news is if, generally if you're a beginner, you're usually starting out with a shorter focal length. And that's kind of, thing where those of us with the longer focal length scopes are a little more in tune with. You really don't have to worry too much about it. Especially to Mark's point, which is a good one. You don't have to get the polar alignment perfect anyway because it's a short focal length, and then that kind of helps anyway with.
I believe the ASA has a setting in the guiding screen, Andy. I've never used it, but you have the option of guiding. Is it south only or something like that? It's got.
Yeah. Well, that's
it's got an option.
Yeah, PH2 setting. Yeah.
Yeah.
That it carried on. Yeah.
Because what'll happen if you don't get that quite right, even on a longer or shorter focal length, Andy, the guide scope is still the same focal length. So if you're bumping it south, and all of a sudden you got to go back north, now you have a delay, and now you're going back to the other direction. But now because of the delay, you lost time, and now you're drifting. Now this is what I'm talking about, going back and forth on the north-south declination correction. That was just a tip, and I've used it ever since, and it really helps out on that axis.
How How much do you move it off center, Marcus? Is it like a 5 arc minutes or?
I'm usually, I'm usually in the polar alignment scope. Okay, I'm on the circle,
Okay.
but then I just tweak it just a little bit, east and west, depending on what side of the circle that the pole star is at, and then it always corrects on the declination axis in the same direction.
Yeah, it's good to know.
Either way, it doesn't matter if you're always correcting to the north or always correcting to the south. It doesn't matter. But your motor never has to take up the backlash. I would say lever, hardly ever, because obviously nothing's perfect for that either.
All right, moving on to the types of modes that the ASI Air has. There's live mode, a plan mode, an auto run mode, and a video mode. The live mode basically is a really nice feature for star parties, kind of. And what you can do is set it up that, okay, I'm going to do M42, and it just kind of does a live stacking for you. And if you have calibration frames, it'll also use those, you know, if you have them on the ASI Air. So it would do the dark subtraction and the flat frames. And, you know, you just go through and it keeps doing it. And it was kind of interesting about that is, for me, I've used it at star parties, but I used it at my parents' house to show them. And I had M42. And, you know, it looked really great on the screen, but then I ended up using the subs that I was using for, you know, a real processing. And I think I shared my M42 with the group a few months ago from that. And it worked out unbelievably well. I don't know why I was surprised, but, you know, it did. So that's a good thing to have. You know, for star parties. The plan mode allows you to do multiple targets in a you know, for a night, or, you know, and you can carry it over. The auto run is kind of a simplified mode. It's meant for one target, pretty easy to use. And the video mode is great for capturing, you know, video. And, you know, Walter has shared, you know, some of his planetary stuff that he's used from the video mode. So is there anything I missed there, Walter?
No, you didn't miss anything. But one of the neat things that I learned last time I took the ASI Air out was that with plan mode, you can do mosaics. Because you can, you know, tell it, take a frame here, another one here, and at the end, you can use Microsoft Ice or some other program. You can use PixInsight to stitch them together and create mosaics.
Yeah, that's
what I was using.
That with the plate solving would give you some really nice mosaics.
Yeah.
Right. So you can design the mosaic in something like Telescopius, and then copy the mosaic instructions, and paste them into the ASI Air plan mode, and it'll take care of the rest.
Yeah. So here's the question I have on plan mode. I've always wanted a program that I can program in supernova search targets. So AAVSO has a supernova program, and if you can with this plan mode, I would guess it would go from galaxy to galaxy and take your 10-minute black and white picture, right? And go to the next one and the next one and the next one. You wouldn't have to do it manually.
Right. If you knew the galaxy numbers and all that, yes.
Yeah.
Definitely possible.
Yeah. Because if I have, let's say I have any one night 10 targets of galaxies, right? And every time I go out that they're up in the sky, I want to take a picture of them. And that could be in the plan mode, right? That You'd be able to do that. Yep. Yeah. And all you're looking for is the supernova. You're not looking for a pretty picture of it. You're just doing it like a blink comparator type library.
Right.
I'm
So
curious about all that info. Is that on an SD card, an external hard drive? How do you transfer it to a computer to edit it?
that's a really good question. So there's a couple different ways. You can do what they call bridge mode with Wi-Fi, right? So I can do that from my home here, where it's connected to, you can program it to connect to your home Wi-Fi, and then it has an IP address. And if you know Windows, you can do // 192 blah 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 to what the IP address is, and then you can just do it like a file explorer and pull them over. And
Okay.
that's kind of what I do, but I do it via Ethernet. Now I know
So,
Walter's done more sophisticated things. So
No, I was just gonna say, I learned if it's connected to the same network as your desktop or laptop or whatever you want to use to download, all you got to do is / ASIR.
see,
Sounds pretty simple.
Yeah, but the simplest, most fail-safe way is just get a thumb drive and stick it on it and copy it over.
Yeah, I don't like doing that. Oh, a thumb drive, right? I'm sorry. Yeah, because okay, that's really great point. I guess so it's got 4 USB ports on it and an Ethernet port. And if you just take a USB stick and you're saving it there through the night instead of the SD card, which is right there, then that's another way.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Walter. That was a great point.
But some of us with Ethernet don't have to worry about that. So.
Yeah, I know. We're kind of divas. Okay. Just a little bit more. So if you haven't figured it out by now, it has full control of your camera mount. And it's all controlled by whatever Android or iOS device you want, whether it's your phone or a tablet. For me, with being old and my eyes, I find the phone is just too small, even with my glasses. So I have a cheap tablet that I bought. It was like $100, and so that's a nice wide field of view, and that's what I use whenever I use it, especially in the field. Again, I mentioned this earlier, but it's locked into ZWO equipment, which is really unfortunate. And I think they're missing an opportunity, to go in with other dedicated astronomy cameras. And as of now, it only supports Canon and Nikon SLRs. Just a quick. Here's kind of a couple screenshots for you. Here's the telescope settings. It can you can either program it in your lat long, or it can just take it off your phone, which is kind of handy. Sync from phone. Guiding rate you should never mess with. So here's your Wi-Fi, connecting to Wi-Fi, a camera, your guiding, telescope, filter wheel, electronic focuser, and then your, whatever, your SD or your USB thumb drive. And then these are always here available during any point during the night. You could see just your guiding screen. It gives you the histogram view, which is always a good thing, of your shots. You can tell it to plate solve, and then it knows where it is, crosshair, so on and so forth. And then, you get real-time view of what you're imaging. So here's this isn't mine. This is just something I grabbed off the internet. But here's the Bubble Nebula. They're taking long exposures. So here's the histogram.
And you can what's the word? Manipulate the histogram live. And I found that feature very, very useful. Something that Nina actually is missing.
So say some
you
more
could
about.
You can grab those little arrows.
Oh,
right there on the
yeah.
histogram
Okay.
And adjust them whatever way you want.
Right. So what Walter's saying is automatically it's saying, this is what I think the best is. And it gives you, but if you want to see something different, they just click on here and then drag it. I literally clicked on it, but not the PowerPoint, you know, and get you see how dark the background is or light background is. Yeah. So that's kind of nice.
Does it automate the meridian flip?
It does, yeah. If your mount can do it, it will talk to the mount and tell it to flip.
Okay, well, that's good because that's messed me up in the past because you've got to get that GPS coordinates. I like how it's going from the phone.
Yeah.
Because how I set it up, I've got to have an EQ mod. I got to set the location right. I got to go to astrophotography tool, set that location right.
Right.
It's just all the different places. And I've had nights that I forgot to do one of them, and it's like, what's going on? It's not working.
I've been there, or I've gone to bed and lost a whole half a night.
Yep.
So, hey, Andy, if you go back one screen or two where it has the mount information, you see that the button, the second green button towards the bottom, it says sync from phone.
Yeah.
That will sync your GPS location and your exact time to the ASIR.
Nice.
From the ASIR to the mount, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is very useful because of daylight saving. Sometimes that messes up things too. So it's real useful that it syncs it directly from a very accurate timepiece.
Okay, so that brings us to a special announcement. Dun, dun, dun. Somebody have a drum roll? All right, beautiful. I'm going to donate not my ASIR Plus, but my ASIR to the club. And what I would propose at Mark, and we can talk about this, is maybe loan it out into 2-month stints. So what would be included with this, of course, is the unit itself, which is this one, and the power controller for it, and the cables, you know, all the stuff that if you bought it, that would come with it. Greg gets it first because I had already offered it to him before I thought of this idea. Greg Sisko. But I thought, you know, we don't spend too much stuff on club. Maybe it would be good to purchase a second one that we could pass around and, you know, for people who are beginning and whatnot. That's just.
So what other equipment is compatible with the ASIR? Like what camera do you need to?
Yeah, that's the only thing you got to be concerned with. So it has to be, for a dedicated astronomy camera, it has to be a ZWO camera, or it can be any Canon or any Nikon or Nikon, however you pronounce that. So that's the caveats for it.
Okay.
But it will interfere.
What is the cost of an ASIR?
The Plus is what, $350, Walter?
I've actually never looked into it.
Yeah, we could look it up online. It's either.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then what is the cost for a basic ZWO camera?
Basic. Well, again, that's not an easy question to answer because it's matching it up to your scope, right?
The Plus is $299.
Pardon me?
Okay, the
The
ASI
ASI Plus is $299.
Okay,
so I would say, you know, an uncooled camera, I think comes in around 500. A planetary camera would come in, I don't know, Walter, you probably have a better idea than me.
Yeah, I mean,
Three or 400.
let's say like a hockey
For the
puck
120.
colored one is about, I don't know, $200.
Yeah, but the M1, the 120 is about $200. Is GWO.
Yeah.
and then a deep sky.
Probably you could start at around 750.
Okay,
That's one shot color.
right. Yeah, the one shot color.
Yep.
Okay.
I also have a 533 MC Pro, which is sitting idle, which I wouldn't want to make on a permanent club basis, but I'm more than willing to loan out to somebody.
That's a DSLR.
No, that's the ZWO.
Okay.
Cool.
Is that the 1-inch square
Yeah.
sensor?
Correct.
How do you like that?
I love it. I absolutely love it. It just doesn't match up with my two scopes right now, so
Yeah.
perfectly.
You know, they just came out with the mono version.
Yeah, I know. I thought that was tempting. Yeah, but one of the nice things about, you know, some of the newer versions of, and it doesn't have to be ZWO, it could be QHY, you know, it's just based on the Sony chip, is there's no amp glow. Like the 533 has 0 amp glow. That's so nice. I mean, my other two cameras that I have running, you know, I have to deal with that. So amp glow, but yeah, so that's it. So I don't know, Mark, maybe we could give some thought on the best way to do that. Whether it's a sign up mode or contacting me directly, I don't know what might be best for that.
Yeah, we'd have to include like 2 nights of on-the-job training or something like that too.
Yeah, well, you know, I guess depending on how busy I am, that's a possibility. But I tell you what, there are some absolutely tremendous YouTube videos out there.
Well, what I'm trying to get at though is that, you know, I don't want to have it so that, okay, somebody has it for a couple of months and they never use it because they never figured out step 5 or something.
Right.
And for, again, someone starting out new, or even someone coming over from a different camera, you may have some, you know, issues starting up with it.
Maybe, yeah. So maybe
You
that's
know.
a really good point. Maybe the thing to do would be, I don't anticipate like missing club meetings at this point. Work has kind of settled down a bit. So, you know, if we had to transition at a club meeting, we could say, okay, bring your equipment, and we could, you know, have a follow-up.
Right.
And it doesn't
And, you know,
even,
and then for that, it doesn't matter if it's full moon or new moon. I mean,
it doesn't
you're
even have
learning
to
how to
be,
use it.
it doesn't even, it could be cloudy.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. It's just setting it up and
Right.
getting used to it. So
Right. Make sure everything's plugged in right and you're doing things in the right sequence. All that. Yeah. Okay. That's something to consider.
yeah, and if maybe 2 months is too short, I don't know, you know, because if there's like the last 2 months you've been out 3 times, you know.
Right. I mean, it's, yeah. And the next 2 weeks don't look any better.
No?
Okay. Well, thanks, Andy. This was a very informative. And, you know, the technology is going crazy with this stuff. It looks like it's changing so much that you almost have to make the right choice and stick with it, right? I mean, that's the problem with some of this stuff. I mean, you know, the software freeware is one thing, but you pick your hardware out and you have to learn it and make it work, you know.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of recommending astronomy equipment,
Right.
but I have a hard time not recommending this because it is so easy to get up and running and be productive. The processing is another side of the story, but getting good data, this goes a long way.
Well, I think one thing, like this is a system with the ZWO camera, basically, and then the Canon and the Nikon. So there are other systems out there compatible with other cameras, right?
Right. And that's why, if we did decide to purchase a second, maybe we'd want to go the other route of, I already forgot, Astroberry.
Yeah. So maybe that's for the next meeting, maybe that's the project for everyone, is to pick one of these out and see what's compatible with, put a proposed system together. And it's okay, so for SBIG it's this, for ZWO it's this, for whatever whatever that other new one is. Yeah. This is what you need for that. And this one's compatible with short focal length Newtonians. This one's for Richie Crichton. What I'm saying. It's just the compatibleness with it. And then but what do you want to shoot with this? And that was always okay. If I want to do easy nebula, that's one thing. If I want to do deep sky 13th magnitude galaxies, that's another. Am I going to be able to shoot from a dark site more often than not? Because again, Bob talked about this earlier, when you pick your camera out, you have to pick out what your sky gives you, because you can buy a really sensitive camera and it will never work around this place,
Well, yeah, well, that's where you get into filters. So that's a whole nother kettle of fish. But
Right. But you also want to make sure that when you pick something, you can grow into it and you don't outgrow it too fast. Well, and or it's compatible with your sky and you can enjoy it, and then it also is compatible with the dark side.
Right. And that's and again, when we're talking beginners and newbies, going with a small mount that handles small focal lengths, I don't think, for me, I'm never going to outgrow that little scope over here.
Right.
I'm going to have that probably a lot longer than I have my big G11, because I know in 10 years it's going to be hard to be hauling around,
Right.
But this thing, I can literally pick up the entire thing, put it in the yard, and start. It's just,
when I look at the results you get from that little toy, I'm very impressed, and it has definitely flavored the direction I want to go.
Well, the telescope you use the most is the one.
Yeah.
And something small like that gets used a lot more.
Yeah. I'm very disinclined to bring my big scope to the club site because it's such a hassle. But the little one, that's what I'm going to be going. I'm going to be bringing that every time.
Yep.
But anyway, you brought out, what do I want to shoot? And that's why I was talking about it. Is that for me, there's only a few months out of the year, and we're right in the middle of it, where it's hard to find targets for that scope.
Right.
You got Markarian's chain, which you can get, a beautiful view of a lot of galaxies. But if you're looking for individual galaxies, that's not M101, M31, then that's the little scopes are never gonna be what you want. But during the summer, there's so many nebula, and through the winter, actually, early winter, there's just a never-ending choice of things to shoot.
No, that's true.
Another selling point for me is you don't have to stand out there in the cold for hours. You can, if you have to monitor it, you can sit on the other side of the window.
Yeah. Well, I paid my dues with that, you know. I sat out in my yard with my laptop
Yep, yep.
in 10-degree weather, 3 blankets over me.
I bet you remember those nights, don't you?
I do. Actually, they were really kind of fun, but
Yeah.
the winter nights, the mosquito nights are not fun.
No. I'd rather bundle up than put bug spray on. That's-
Yeah, me too.
I don't know. In the winter, you got to keep yourself awake so you don't freeze to death while you're sleeping. Yeah.
Well,
Like,
I'm looking forward to sitting in the comfort of my car while those bugs try to get at me.
Yeah.
well,
yeah,
then
this thing's been a game changer though. The ASI Air.
It really
because
has.
You see people online now. They just buy the kit. I'm buying the telescope, the guider, the fucking blah blah blah. And here I am. Now I'm going to put it together and I'll be an astrophotographer. Like, okay, good. That's more people to the hobby.
yeah.
And then they go out in the field and say, okay, where's Vega?
Well, the thing already knows.
Yeah, as long as you can polar align,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you don't have to know any of that stuff.
It doesn't,
Which in a
you know,
sense is a shame, but
yeah.
So
And
did
in sky, some skies you
anyone
can't see.
get up early the other day and look at the planets in the morning?
Actually, I didn't.
No, you missed something really nice.
Hmm.
Jupiter, Venus, Mars, and Saturn in that order, about this far apart each, you know, holding your hand up. And then the full moon was setting in the west. So it's pretty cool.
had a view to the west or the east.
Yeah, pretty soon Mercury's going to be in that mix. And then the moon's going to be down there as well. So, yeah. Okay, well, I think it went really well tonight.
Yep.
What do you think is a good subject for next time?
Thank you, Andy. That was really good. I thoroughly enjoyed that.
Yeah,
Good.
yeah, I learned a lot.
I think pairing
Okay.
a telescope to a camera would be a great topic. How do I do it?
As an aside, if anyone wants to go to iTelescope, telescope.com, they give away a lot of free time on telescopes now, like the 11-inch RASA. So, and you don't have to be a member. You just go in there and say, I want to try a telescope.
That would be another interesting subject.
Oh, yes. Yes, for me, definitely.
Well, you know,
I know I've gone in there and I can't remember why I didn't stick with it. Whether it was, I just couldn't figure out what was going on but I'd be really curious to see your experience with it.
they've completely redone all the software and everything else. So it's like a lot easier to use.
Maybe that's what it was. Yeah.
So.
I remember when you first mentioned it a few years ago. I wasn't ready for it, but I went out and checked it out. I was daunted by the choices.
Yeah.
It's overwhelming. Kid in the candy. I don't think it was free then either.
Well, they got a lot of free time, like during the moon now, anything's free. For when you got a full moon or the moon's in the sky a lot, taking away portions. So every people that are experimenting with their various filters, things like that.
Those guys are everywhere, right?
Yeah, like I said, Australia, Spain, United States, and
It's always dark
Really?
somewhere.
always cloudy somewhere too. Trust me.
The sun
I mean,
never
these are
rises.
really, really dark skies.
The sun never rises on iTelescope.
Just by way of that really intrigues me, the full moon thing, because here's something I did with the HA filter.
Yep.
Around the full moon.
Yep.
And that's 27 5-minute images. of the Crescent Nebula.
Yeah.
And it, you know, with the, of course, it depends on the, you know, this is a good filter. It's a 3 nanometer filter, but, you know, when you're doing narrow band imaging, you know, the moon, you can figure out ways around the moon.
For sure.
Yeah.
So I have a question about the next meeting. If we want to do it a month from now, week of May 16th, that's the week after our regular meeting, May 9th. Some of the people had asked to do a different night than Monday night. Is a Tuesday night better? Is that okay?
I'm
Both
okay
nights
with
work
20.
fine for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty open since I'm a lazy
Okay.
bum.
Same here, as long as it's same time, like around 7 or something.
Okay, yeah, let's try for May 17th. That's the day after the full moon again, so it's a Tuesday. And now a couple people have things going on Monday night that they can't make, like Jim Reynolds has barbershop practice, and a couple other people have other meetings too, and sometimes they can make the regular meeting. But, so yeah, why don't we try for that? I'll send out a notice and do the reservation again. And then
If you could do the calendar invite too, that I find those really helpful.
what's that?
Yeah, because you've been sending out calendar invites to the club meetings.
Yeah,
If we could do it for these too, that would be great. I almost
Okay.
forgot about tonight. That's my own fault, but
yeah, because I've been sending out like just my own email as a reminder. Okay. So we'll try for May 17th, 7 o'clock. And then I'll put on there pairing a telescope to a camera, or vice versa, pairing a camera to a telescope. And then maybe what we could do is start a matrix with like this ASI Air and the ZWO camera type matchup for other controllers and software and cameras.
Okay.
and I think whoever should get first dibs should be who is ever on this call. Or second dibs, because Greg.
Mark, how many people are we going to pick up by switching to Tuesday?
I'm sorry?
How many people more additional are we getting because we're switching to a Tuesday?
Probably 3 or 4.
Okay.
Definitely worth it.
Yep.
Yeah. Because there were a couple people that would have been here tonight, but were traveling and couldn't make it.
What about the other side of the coin? How many are we losing because of Tuesday?
I didn't hear from anybody that were losing. Wait till we try Saturday afternoon at 2 o'clock again. See how many show up then?
That's that harder to get to.
Yeah.
I'd say it would depend on where we're going to wind up meeting. I understand the Batavia Library has taken away one of the rooms to make room for their new 3D printer. I don't know which one it is, but
Be a
Not
big
much to choose
3D
from.
printer.
And the coffee shop is not there, is that right?
No, they got something else there. It's a bakery now.
Oh, okay. Bring your own coffee.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I think the Zoom option will probably get more attendance.
I think so too.
I
Yeah.
agree. I there's a time and a place to go in person and touch the stuff, but what we're doing right now, this did not need to be in person.
I mean, if we do a hands-on something or other, that's another story, but that would be at night, and you know.
Well, I mean, you could coordinate that with the public star party for one thing, you know.
That's, yeah, that's,
After the crowd is gone home, you know, whoever wants to be involved with this, we're gonna go over this part of the parking lot. And have a
And,
demo.
another thing is, you don't get to rent, check out the ASIs unless you've gone to the qualification class.
that's
That way, nobody's stuck with training and retraining and training the next guy. And
Right.
that's
you know,
quite good.
we do it once, you get a certificate. You can now take that out.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And one of the other things that crossed my mind is when word of this gets out, we may have people joining the club just to get their hands on that. Well, okay, but
You gotta wait 2 years, but you know.
you got to wait till the next class. No, you got to wait till the next class.
Yeah.
Curious,
And-
how many of us are still using DSLRs?
Boy, I am.
You know, it's funny, John, is I'm, I want to go back and do some of that.
Every time I decide it's time to go get a real camera, and I look at the price tag and I go, "Nah, the DSLR."
Yeah, I mean, you could get a used one for $200 that works well. But I know the trouble I have a lot of times, which I think might be a good subject, is between ISO and exposure. Because I get confused on what I want to do there. And Ashley, you're using all DSLR.
Yeah.
It might help her out too.
It would.
Yeah.
Well, let's make that number 2 subject for next time.
Okay.
'Cause I could use a lesson on that too.
Yeah.
I don't want to let Herman off the hook. I want an eye telescope presentation.
Mhm.
Okay, so May 17th, 7 o'clock. It's a Tuesday night.
Perfect.
And I recorded this, and we'll see what happens if I can get it loaded up correctly. No. I just end the meeting, right? I don't have to do anything. Oh, here's recording.
Yeah, well, you can do it either way.